Okay, today we're going to do 11.3 distance and midpoint formula, which you all have done before, or you should have done, but we're going to do it again. And so what this means is if you have a coordinate plane and you have 2 points on that coordinate plane, we can find the distance between those 2 points and we can find the midpoint, which means right in the middle, which is why it's called the midpoint. Okay, so write your 2 formulas down. Distance equals the square root of x squared, the second x minus the first x, or x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, so basically you're subtracting your x's. It doesn't matter which is the first, which is the second. You're squaring it and you're adding it to the difference in your y's. That's the distance formula. The midpoint formula is represented by an m. Well, it doesn't really say m. So this is an actual number. The midpoint formula, midpoint, which means it's actually going to end up being a point. Okay, it's actually going to be a coordinate. So it's x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay, so up here is the distance and down here is the midpoint. So write those down because you will need those, okay? Now, as we go on, okay, so here's an example. Find the distance and midpoint of, I got to come up with a different, okay. So the distance and midpoint of each one of these. So you can think of this as x1, y1, x2, y2, and you just sub it into your formula. Okay, so the distance equals the square root, okay, of x2, so that's this one right here, which is 3. It doesn't really matter which x you start with, minus 1 squared plus y2, which is negative 2, minus y1, which is a negative 5 squared. Okay, now if you put this in your calculator correctly, you can just put that on your calculator. I'm going to do it by hand though. So 3 minus 1 is 2 squared, plus this is negative 2 plus 5. So 3 squared, which is going to give me the square root of 4 plus 9, which is the square root of 13, okay? And if you put that, I'm sure, let's just leave it, well, the square root of 13, which if you put that in your calculator, which is fine, and we'll round it, is 3.6. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that, okay? Sometimes you'll leave it as a square root of 13. Other times you'll do 3.6, okay? Now the midpoint, if you're doing the midpoint of these same points, you would just add, remember midpoint is just like finding the average. So you add 1 plus 3, which is our x's, and then our y's are negative 5 plus negative 2 over 2. This is one big point. So this is 4 over 2 and negative 7 over 2, which reduces to 2. And then you can leave it as negative 7 over 2, or you can say negative 3 1/2. So the midpoint of these 2 points would be 2, negative 3 1/2 on a coordinate plane. Okay? Okay, so on this example, okay, so distance equals the square root, okay, of x2, so 4 minus a negative 1 minus x1 squared, plus y2, which is negative 3, minus y1 squared. Okay, so again, if you put that in your calculator correctly, that's the key. So this is really 4 plus 1, so 5 squared, plus negative 3 minus 5, which is really negative 8 squared. Okay, so this is going to become the square root of 25, and remember when you put negative 8 into your calculator, you need to do the parentheses. Okay, you need to do the parentheses. So 64 plus 25 is the square root of 89, which is 9.4. Would be the distance from this point to this point on a coordinate plane. Okay, the midpoint, you'd add your x's. -1 plus 4 over 2. Remember, it's just like finding the average. 5 plus -3 over 2. So this becomes 3 over 2. And this becomes 2 over 2. So we have 1.5 and 1. That's the point. That's the midpoint. That's why it's called a midpoint, because you're actually going to have a point. Okay? Now, our last one. Sometimes they're going to give you just the triangle, and it's going to say, find the perimeter of the triangle. Okay? So you have to come up with your points. Okay? And you have to find the distance of all 3 sides. Okay, now if it was just flat across, like just straight, then you could just count, but these aren't on this one. So this point right here is 3, -3. This A is -2, 5. And this C is -4, -1. You have to find the distance, so you have to do the distance formula 3 times. Okay, so let's do from A to B. The distance from A to B. So if we have we do our x's first. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you pick. So we do -2 minus 3 squared plus 5 minus a -3 squared. So we have the square root 5 squared, -5 squared, I'm sorry. Plus, this really becomes positive, 8 squared. I feel like this is one we just did. 25 plus 64, okay, which was what, 89? The square root of 89, which is 9.4. So this distance is 9.4. Shh, Piper, you gotta be quiet. Okay, the distance from A to C, is -2 minus a -4 squared plus 5 minus -1 squared. Okay, so the square root, this really becomes positive, so this becomes 2 squared plus 6 squared. So then it's the square root of 4 plus 36, the square root of 40, which is 6.3. Okay, so this is 6.3. All right. Now from C to B is the square root, okay, -4 minus 3 squared plus -1 minus a -3 squared. Remember, these are your x's, these are your y's. Shh, you have to be quiet, baby. Okay, so the square root, this is going to be -7 squared plus, this will become a positive. So it's really 2 squared. Remember, -7 times -7 is 49 plus 4. Please stop. Please stop. So the square root of 53, which is, I don't know, 7 point something. 7.3. So right here is 7.3. So then it asks for the perimeter. Okay, so you would take 9.4 plus 6.3 plus 7.3. So 7.3, obviously this is an estimation. And you would get 23. This one happens to turn out nice and neat with these estimations. So 24 would be the perimeter. Okay, that's it.